Hey, Howell here. What I want to do today is a book review on Ken Kesey's One Flew the Cuckoo's Nest, published in 1962 and set during the time of Eisenhower, perhaps sometime in the 50s, I believe. You can work it out, you can guess from that. And it was made into a film with Jack Nicholson playing the main character, McMurphy, and then Louise Fletcher playing the big nurse. And it's set, the synopsis is it's set on a hospital ward, a mental health ward in the middle of Oregon somewhere, a psychiatric ward. And there is a nurse that basically controls this ward through a very strict regime. She's like a megalomaniac. And she does it by going along with ward policy that she would have obviously had a massive say in writing. And what happens is that Murphy turns up feigning insanity in order to get out of the work farm, and then he challenges her strict regime, and her regime then starts to break down. That's the basic synopsis of it, and the whole novel leads up to the apex of a party. The party is the apex, this illegal party on the ward. Now, it's my view. Well, there's a battle of classes going on in the book, which is more exemplified better or stronger in the film. But it very much a battle of the sexes or a battle of the genders going on. It's my belief my opinion that men and women are different. Now, I'm willing to believe, or I do believe, you've got the masculine and the feminine in the masculine, what our ancestors called the anima and the animus, and that some men are more like women and some women are more like men. It's like a spectrum, but there is a dividing line between men and women. And she characterizes a certain type of woman rather than a certain type of person. That she's a megalomaniac, she's a psychopath, and men can be like that, of course, but they would generally do it quite differently. It would be a bit more brutal, in my own opinion, my own view. And I'll come to that a bit more later, because what McMurphy does is he turns up and emasculates all these very not emasculates, he empowers, emasculates these very depowered patients on the ward. And in the group therapy plays a massive part in the novel. It's the forum in which all these battles are played out. Now, in the introduction to the novel, Ken Kesey talks about his own experience on hospital wards, working on hospital wards, and experimenting legally with LSD in this project. I'm not sure what it's called, Project Monarch or Project MK Ultra or something like that. And he talks about his experience of group therapy, and he said it had very little to do, or nothing to do, with therapy. It had to do with each individual patient just conforming to the regime on the ward. Either trying to get some favor, look how open I can be, or look how well I'm going along with this procedure, or they're trying to get out of the ward or stay on the ward or get out of the work farm, whatever. And he saw it has very little to do with actual therapy. And humor plays a big part in this novel. It's a very, very funny novel, but because it's a very serious novel, the humor is quite black and quite dark. And so there's a scene where they're in group therapy. Nurse Ratchet's leading it. It's seen through the eyes, first person singular, of the chief Bromden, this huge, great Native American patient on the ward, right? Their mouths opened in unison. Her sweeping eyes stopped to the first man along the wall. His eyes worked. I robbed a cash register in a service station. She moved on to the next man. I tried to take my little sister to bed. Her eyes clicked to the next man. Each one jumped up like a shooting gallery target. Um, I one time tried to take my brother to bed. I killed my cat when I was 6. Oh God, forgive me. I stoned her to death and said it. My neighbour did it. I lied about trying. I did take my sister. So did I. So did I. And me. And me. It was better than she ever dreamt. They were all shouting to outdo each other. Now, there's no way of telling in the context of fiction whether or not it's true or not. You know, it sounds to me that what they're doing is just conforming. So, you know, how good can I be? Or, you know, they're trying to sort of whatever. There's something else in it. It's very little to do with therapy. When you read that in context, though, it's really, really funny. And another theme in the novel is the class struggle, which is exemplified more in the film than in the book. So what you've got is Dale Harding. Now he's a college boy, and he's a little bit pompous. He's a little bit, you know, he's a little bit pompous, and he uses a bit of intellect and philosophy when he talks, you know, bringing in examples and what have you. And then you've got McMurphy, the main character, who's from more of a working class background. And so there's a conflict with the way that they communicate. And so here's a scene. It says, Harding having a tough time holding his hand still, but still he acts calm. So he says, it's as simple, he's talking to McMurphy, it's as simple as that. You're on our ward 6 hours, and I've already summed up the works of Freud and Jung and Maxwell Jones and summed up in one analogy. It's a pecking party. And I'm not talking about Fred Young and Maxwell Jones, buddy. I'm just talking about what that crummy meeting and what that nurse and those other bastards did to you in there in spades. Did it to me? Yes, that's right. Did it to you every chance you got. Did it to you coming? Did it to you going? Harding goes, and then Harding goes on to support the nurse in the system. You know, obviously, Harding had been in a group therapy session, and he'd opened up, you know, and to the point of incriminating himself or embarrassing himself. And you know, I can sympathise with Harding a little bit, particularly in the novel, because he's a little bit different in the novel and the film. Because, you know, when I was young, I used to sort of bring in philosophy and intellect, embellish my way of communicating, and it just got absolutely knocked out of me. And so McMurphy there has got a much more brutal, much more down-to-earth, direct way of communicating. So there's a two different schools of communicating. And then, you know, Harding, who suffering from Stockholm syndrome, the way he sort of sucks up to the nurse and goes along with everything. But then he contradicts himself. So here it goes. That's right, says Cheswick, coming up beside Mac. Grind our nose in our mistakes. Why don't you fire her? In this hospital, Harding says, the doctors don't have the power of hiring and firing. That power goes to the supervisor. And the supervisor is a dear old friend of Nurse Ratchet. They were nurses together in the 30s. We are all victims of a matriarchy here. And the doctors are just as helpless against it as we are. He knows that all Nurse Ratchet has to do is pick up that phone you see by her elbow, yeah, and call the supervisor and say, oh, that doctor is making a number of requisites for Demerol. She's got, you know, she's, first of all, Harding there is now coming out of his Stockholm syndrome, contradicting himself, and then admitting that they're all victims of a matriarchy there. And he exemplifies there that she's got complete control above and below her, and she knows how to do it. And she knows exactly how to do it. I mean, I'll give you an example. Is that there's a scene where the nurse is with the doctors and the psychiatrists and all those above her, and they're all men basically, and they want to move McMurphy on, move Mac on, and then she wants to keep him on the ward, so as to so she can take him on as a challenge and try to break him down or whatever, and then she says, well, if we move him on, we're just passing our problem on to someone else. I think we should keep him here, blah, blah, blah. And so if anybody says, no, we're going to move him on, they're exposed to moving their problem on to somewhere else. And he'd already, by that time, exposed himself to be a problem on the ward. And there's another scene which is quite interesting where McMurphy finds out to his absolute horror that all these new friend patients of his are not committed. They're voluntary, and he just can't believe it. It's like a betrayal of freedom for him. And so he turns to Billy Bibbit, and Billy Bibbit's this character that's very emasculated, and he's trying to empower him. He's been empowering him all the way through the novel. And so he turns to Billy, he goes, Billy, you've got to be committed, right? You've got to be committed. And Billy Bibbit's got this stutter, and he goes, and then he goes, no, I'm not, and it's very difficult for him to be honest and admit, because he's exposed as being committed on a ward. Nobody else had asked him that question. Nobody had said, what are you doing here? And getting him to think like that. And McMurphy says, you should be out in the convertible, bird, dog and beaver, blah, 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 blah. And obviously he's very afraid of the world out there. And then McMurphy turns to the patients and says, look, none of you are any more crazier than the average loon out on the street. And they all know it's true. They all know it's sanity. It's not sanity out there and insanity in here. They know it's not like that. They know that there's crazy, insane people with mental health, whatever the term you use to describe it, is existing outside of the hospital ward. And they know it's fear that they don't check out voluntarily. Okay? They don't check out voluntarily. And now throughout the novel, the chief talks about the Combine. And he talks about the Combine being something as a part of your psyche. It's installed within you. And despite the fact he's a huge 6'6" giant, of a man, he's frightened by the Combine. The Combine has got to him. The Combine would be like the Illuminati or the Cabal or whatever, the Black Lodge or something like that. There's a million, 100 ways of words for it. The system. And, because I have a neurological condition, which means that as the Combine, the system was being downloaded on me unconsciously by teachers and school and media and family and whatever, my hard drive, so to speak, was jerking. So I'm able to see the Combine slightly objectively. Not that I'm not subjective, not that I'm not in it, in this matrix that they call it at all. I am. And it's got to me as well, but I can see it objectively, which is why I identified so much with this novel. And there is a scene when McMurphy first turns up on the ward, and the chief notices that a member of staff is trying to get a thermometer in his mouth by means, as a part of a sort of an initial health screen. But McMurphy sees that as being controlled by the system. It doesn't matter whether his temperature is normal, high or low. He just doesn't want that thermometer in his mouth trying to control him. There is a really poignant scene in the film and the book for me, and in the washroom, in the middle of the washroom, there's this huge, great marble structure, which is full of sinks and taps and what have you. Murphy, who has won a lot of money and IOUs from gambling with the other patients, sees that he might be able to lift this structure off the ground, throw it through the window, and then be free. So it becomes a sort of instrument of freedom, if you like. And so he goes, right, there's this big bet to see whether he can move this structure. I think it's made of marble, right? And the chief is looking at it. And so Murphy says, stand back, everybody, you're using up my oxygen and stuff. And as he tries to lift it, the chief notices that it's loosening at the ground, meaning that it is possible to move that. And then McMurphy then realizes that there's no way he's going to be able to move it and throw it through the window using gravity or whatever, inertia and gravity. And so he just puts it down. He puts it down, and he's been defeated. He's lost his bet. He's lost his IOUs or whatever. And so they're all the other patients are gloating upon him. You failed. And then he turns to them and says, "But I tried. Least I did that. I tried, God damn it. Least I did that." And then you get the feeling of the patient sort of thinking, yeah, he did try. He did try and we didn't. He tried to free himself. We didn't. Obviously, the hospital ward obviously represents society, the wider society. The combine on the hospital ward is the combine of the matrix, if you like. I don't like that word because it means womb. It's a Hebrew word. I tend not to use it. And so Kesey is just using this hospital ward to talk about society in general there. Kesey was sort of criticized, because of the emasculation of men. Because what he's doing, he's empowering the men, particularly Billy Bibbit. And so Billy Bibbit goes from being depowered by his mother, to Nurse Ratched. The relationship is continuing, that we've all seen so much in our own lives, that continuing of relationships. And then, as I said before, it all leads up to the big apex, the party, where there's alcohol on the ward. It's an illegal party with alcohol and prostitutes turn up. And then Billy Bibbit then ends up sleeping with a prostitute. And he does it in his kind of own Romeo romantic way. And he suddenly falls in love with her and he loses his virginity. And it's incredibly empowering for him. And then Nurse Ratched turns up. She has a head fit. And then she can't find Billy Bibbit. Where is Billy Bibbit? And then when she finds out he's been sleeping with a prostitute, he then approaches her and goes, well, what concerns me is what your mother is going to think of it. And he goes, Billy Bibbit's got a stammer and stutter. And he goes, oh, no, you don't have to tell her. And then the nurse says, well, I do have to tell her because we're old friends. And then Billy Bibbit just can't bear the reality of that and then commits suicide. And then that completely turns McMurphy. So what happens is that McMurphy and the nurse are confronting each other there. Now, what's interesting here is that she does what all psychopaths do. You think there's going to be a point where I've gone too far. I threatened to tell his mother and now he's committed suicide. And they begin to reflect and they go, oh my God, what have I done? But she doesn't. What she does is she projects that onto McMurphy. And I'm kind of giving spoilers here a little bit. It's because it's such a commonly known story, and she says to McMurphy, first Charles Cheswick and now Billy Bibbit. So she blames it onto McMurphy. And then McMurphy is just incensed by that and the suicide of Billy Bibbit, which he blames her, and then he pounces on her. He absolutely pounces on her. The bathroom scene, yeah. and then he pounces on her and yeah. So really, that sort of concludes my talk on Ken Kesey's novel 1962. I read it about, I don't know, 5 times or something like that. Published in 1962, set during the time of Eisenhower in the 50s, made into a film in the 70s with Louise Fletcher and Jack Nicholson. I do recommend people see the film first, because the film has all sorts of surprises that the book might ruin, and it makes the book easier to read. I like to read the book first and then watch the film. So, yeah, but on this occasion, I sort of say people to watch the film and read the book. But it is probably my favourite novel of all time. It's very empowering to read. It's very like, don't let the bastards get you down. It has that sort of feel to it. And yeah, and thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.